and then we'll just wait for them to confirm. Yeah, okay, so we're now live streaming. Are we ready to start?
Thank you very much, Lucy. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the meeting of Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 9th of June 2020 in what seems to be a specially extended municipal year. Must admit, I wasn't expecting to be here again at this point, but very happy to be here to be chairing this committee and taking forward some of the very important agenda in terms of the council's core services. I think, first of all, in welcoming members tonight, I think we can note that this is the first Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting to take place entirely digitally and remotely. So it's good to be really kind of blazing a trail through the ONS committees in terms of ways of working and in terms of being in line with the requirements to socially distance and ensure that we're not putting anyone at undue risk in the current crisis. I should advise members as well that this meeting is being recorded and it's also being streamed live on YouTube this evening. And this offers our residents another way of engaging with the council's meetings and to be able to understand what it is we are discussing on their behalf. I think as this is a fairly new format to all of us for council meetings, clearly we can take our time a little bit with the agenda this evening. I'd remind members to keep their microphones on mute when they're not talking to make sure there isn't any interference on the line. And I'll ensure that all members have a full chance to contribute to the meeting and make sure that we go through all members on items to ask any questions that they might have. But before the start of the meeting, I think I want to just first thank all of those that have been working hard on our behalf to combat the coronavirus crisis, from council staff to doctors, nurses, carers, essential workers keeping our services running, and those volunteers that engage with residents across the borough. We thank you for everything that you've done on our behalf and on behalf of residents, and I hope that goes for the entire committee in terms of our thanks to those people working across the borough incredibly hard in this current crisis. So I'll move now to agenda item number 1, apologies for absence, and we will take this as a roll call. If the member could just confirm that they are present and also that their audiovisual equipment is working correctly and they can hear and see what's happening in the meeting. So I'll just take Councillor Duffin first of all.
Yep, here.
Thank you. Councillor Churchman.
Here, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Haigh. Councillor Haigh, I think if you're there, you might be on mute.
I think Councillor Haig's frozen. Shall we loop back round and come back and see if he can kind of join back in a second? Oh, here we go.
Sorry, Councillor Haigh, can you hear us okay? We'll come back to Councillor in 1 second. So, Councillor Ralph.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Thank you. Councillor Rice.
Yes, that's fine, Oliver. I can hear you.
Thank you. Councillor Haigh, have you managed to reconnect?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry about that. Just phone froze for a moment.
Brilliant. Thanks. So thank you very much. Everyone's up and running then. We'll go first of all to item number 2, minutes to approve as a correct record the minutes of the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee meetings held on the 14th of January, 23rd of January and 10th of March. If I just run through the committee, so any comments or items to raise? First of all, Councillor Duffin.
No, nothing to add.
Thank you. Councillor Churchman.
Nothing, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Haigh. Councillor Ralph.
Nothing, Chair.
And Councillor Rice.
No, nothing, Chair.
I think we can take those minutes, therefore, as approved. Anyone disagreeing? No, thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you. Those minutes are agreed. We'll move then to item number 3, which is items of urgent business. We've received one item of urgent business for the committee to discuss this evening, an item which is going to Cabinet next week, I believe, on the procurement of a contract to deliver a local full fibre network on behalf of ASLA. And I believe that Jackie Hinchliffe is going to be introducing this item. Jackie.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Hello, Corporate ONS Committee, first Digital ONS Committee. So I'm as Director of Transformation. That's thrilling for me. Thank you. I'm Jackie Hinchliffe, Director of HRD and Transformation for the YouTube video. Thank you for agreeing to take this report. Apologies for the late submission. I think it's relatively self-explanatory. What we're seeking, what we will be seeking from Cabinet is agreement to award a contract to deliver the local full fibre network. As the report points out, the LFN work stream is part of the ASLA programme. We're the lead council for this piece of work, which has been quite successful so far. We've submitted a successful bid to DCMS and been awarded over 4.4 million, which covers the full cost of the network. So there's no cost to the council in relation to this. As it states, procurement is through the Thurrock Cloud partnership agreement, which we're a part of, and that's been through OG, so it gives us a route through to fairly straightforward procurement and contracting. And work done by the procurement team has demonstrated it's the best approach in terms of achieving the outcome, and also it's the most cost effective. There's a range of benefits really that the report only touches on, I think, from the local full fibre network. It will contribute to capital efficiencies in relation to our wide area network, as the ASLA programme will actually replace eventually about 70% of our WAN side. So it does provide some direct efficiencies for the council. It does also provide obviously efficiencies for the other councils that form the ASLA programme. It provides better capacity for the organisation as well through the WAN. And for me, it supports our much wider digital aspirations in terms of smart city, attracting business, and providing better Wi-Fi solutions. So that's really the main thrust of the report. It's I think the work that Sean's team, especially Graham Brace, who put together the report, has done is really commended. He's working with Stella. The senior responsible officer is actually the faster point, so it's a sort of cross-organisation collaboration to achieve the outcome. But it's good that we're the lead council for this. I encourage.
Thanks very much, Jackie. So a couple of questions from me, and then I'll open it out to the rest of the committee. So first of all, I guess in terms of the £4.4 million of investment that's been identified, so you confirm first of all that this is entirely government funding that's being handed to Thurrock Council, and additionally, could you confirm that is that 4.4 million to be spent entirely within the kind of Thurrock Council area, or is that across the ASLA area?
The 4.4 million covers the whole programme, which is across the ASLA region. Thank
you. And just to confirm as well, so that the funding is entirely kind of from the government. So there's no kind of Thurrock Council kind of investment in this programme.
Yeah, no, it's fully funded by the grant that the programme has received from government. So there's no cost to the individual councils.
Thank you. And I guess what Thurrock residents will want to understand on this item is what is the kind of the benefit that will be realised through kind of delivering this programme? So I guess first of all, for Thurrock Council and our partners in terms of what the benefit of improving connectivity would be, and also whether or not there's any wider benefit to Thurrock residents from this programme.
I mean, sure, maybe better answering this one. Yes, I mean it provides what LFFM provides is the infrastructure, which then has the potential to broaden into a wide range of benefits. So it provides that infrastructure, and that's the baseline we need to support individuals, support businesses, support investments. And at the moment we haven't got that infrastructure, so this is the route to do that. I can't technically answer in terms of individual benefits in terms of broadband and Wi-Fi. It will depend upon what individuals purchase, but the potential for them to have it will be there. It provides that foundation.
Sure, thank you. So I guess, Jackie, sure, between you, I guess my assumption from reading this report would be that there's no necessary kind of benefit that Thurrock residents would expect to see from this connectivity. It's more about Thurrock and partners. Is that kind of correct, or would you want to kind of correct my kind of view on that?
If I can, Chair?
Yeah, please.
If I try that first. As Jackie said, what this does is introduce the whole aspect of the infrastructure into Thurrock in the main out of the Assailer authorities. So out of Assailer authorities, including Essex County, there are 7 authorities. There are 130 sites covered by this particular grant, of which 78 are in Thurrock. So by far, well over half is actually being spent and supporting infrastructure in Thurrock. Out of those, they are supporting public sector at this stage to be able to prove the point, if you like. So there are 22 care homes, 3 CCTV, 23 community centres, 24 educational facilities, 2 fire and rescue, and it's those sort of venues at the moment that will benefit from this. And it will actually provide, whilst cheaper broadband facilities, it will be both faster and far more reliable as well.
Thanks, Sean. That's very useful clarification. So last question from me, I guess, a little bit more of a sort of a process-focused kind of question. And as I understand it, in terms of the background to this item, the reason that we are here with an item kind of being rushed urgently to Cabinet is because there's been some confusion through the kind of the procurement process so far. So as I understand it, this was due to go to Cabinet in November 19. We then went into PERDA. There was then an understanding that the director met with the portfolio holder to approve and proceed. However, subsequently, the Director of Commercial and Procurement Services left the organisation, and the associated proof of that decision kind of hasn't been located. And considering that the contract needs to be approved or signed before the 18th of June, with I guess 9 days to go, this feels like we've had a relatively kind of near miss on about £4 million worth of funding. So I guess the kind of the question is, are there lessons to learn in terms of that process, and just making sure that we are very clear about protecting these kind of income streams before we get sort of so close to a deadline?
I'll take that again if I come off mute. There are always lessons, Chair. We can go through this process. Where the confusion comes from back into November, this report was originally twofold. One was for procurement of the wider area network as well, and the other is, as in front of you now, for the local full fibre network. The actual WAN, wider area network, had actually been delegated to me previously, and that was the decision that was taken in November through an ED2, which I completed because it was my delegation from a previous committee. And I think the message, especially with them people departing and leaving with the project team, was that approvals were in place. But only half of the approval was in place, not for the other half, which is this half. And so we get to the point of signing a contract, legal us through the authority, and of course that's where the urgency is coming from. So it is apologies. We will certainly pick it up as a lesson, and we'll take that forward.
Thank you, Sean. What I'll do now then is I'll open out to other members of the committee. Councillor Duffin.
First, congratulations to the team. Anytime we see money, more money getting spent in Thurrock, that's a win. So well done to the team on getting that. One thing I was looking at, so the percentages is average 96% of homes get super fast coverage, and we're 1% higher than that in Thurrock, which is good at 97%. But in terms of fibre, it's 10% is the national average, but Thurrock lags behind with 6%. What's this going to do to achieve that and the boost there? And if not, and this isn't sort of designed and going to have the knock-on impact of boosting this, what are we actually doing to address that and make sure we're at least ahead of the national average, if not better?
I'm not aware of where we are or where this actually takes us, but I can take that question away and bring it back or send a response through to the committee. Apologies.
I think just to add to that though, again, this is proof of concept, and it's a first point, it's the first start. And in terms of a sailor, priorities which the council signed up to in January 2018, one of the key streams of a sailor is this digital connectivity and so on. So this is a start, but what it is it's up there along with economic development, housing, regeneration, job creation, one of the key strands of a sailor.
No, thank you. It's just a massive, obviously, important issue with everything going on in the world. More people are going to be working from home, etc. I'm lucky. I'm in one of that sort of few percent that get fibre, but as digital meetings and things happen over the whole country, not just here, obviously, you can tell with difference of connection based on area. So anything we can do wider than this to improve that is definitely something the council should be looking to improve and help make it easier wherever people have to work in the world, because being in the office just isn't possible for some people.
Thanks very much. Councillor Churchman?
No, I would just like to say I think it's very welcomed. It's good to see, but as you said, there is a couple of lessons to be learned there, but I'm sure that we get over it. But no, very welcomed.
Thank you. Councillor Haigh.
Yeah, I'm fully supportive of the paper. I think, as colleagues have said, really, it's a good investment in Thurrock, and will obviously help to support business and our communities, really, with improved communication. So, yeah, nothing to add, really.
Thank you. Councillor Ralph?
Yeah, I'm very pleased with the investment, especially that it covers so many of our services in our area. I do echo Councillor Duffing's inquiry regarding some black spots we have within Thurrock of Wi-Fi fibre network. I just wonder how long it will be before we see a decent improvement within that, especially sort of East Hilbury and further on in Stanford Hope and Fobbing area.
Again, I haven't got the detail of the technical upgrade, so I can take that away and come back with an answer. I don't know if Sean knows where we've got the. I know that the team are constantly working on the Wi-Fi backbox. But
yeah, I think, Chair, what might be useful is when we get to the work programme at the end of the agenda, we can look for a paper in a few months' time to actually answer a number of these questions about how we've increased the fibre side and what we're doing around black spots and what's actually within the council's power to be able to do. To be clear around that as well in terms of what we can physically do or influence.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. I think that's a good suggestion. And Councillor Rice.
Yes, Chair. Yes, it is welcome. The question I have is why have Southend not signed up to this agreement?
As far as I'm aware, Southend already have full fibre. I think that's the reason, but I will check out and come back why Southend are not now part of the overall approach.
Right. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks a lot, everyone. I think we've been through everyone on this, and I don't think I have any more comments to add. I think, to summarise, recommendation 1.1 essentially asks the committee to agree to this project moving forward. I'll ask you kind of that officially in a second, but it feels like the the view of the committee is in favour of this moving forward. The one thing I'd add to that, more as an observation, I think, for Cabinet and for the project rather than a recommendation. But again, it feels like feeling of the committee is very much that as this project moves forward, we should make sure that we look for opportunities to benefit the connectivity of Thurrock residents as well as local organisations as quickly as possible as this project moves forward. So if committee are happy with that kind of general observation to go forward with this item, I think that would be helpful. A helpful addition. Does anybody want to comment further on the item before we move to recommendation?
No, I say agree, Chair.
Very well. Is everyone happy to agree with recommendation 1.1 then?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Great.
Thank you very much. That is agreed. And we'll move on then to item number 4, which is declarations of interest. Do any members wish to declare any interests? I will start and say that I do not have any interest to declare this evening. Councillor Duffin?
Nope.
Councillor Churchman?
Nothing.
Thank you. Councillor Haigh?
For me,
Councillor Ralph?
None for me.
Thank you. And Councillor Rice?
The only thing I might have to declare is my wife works for CBS. So I need some advice on that.
Thank you, Gerald. That's noted. I, as chair, I would kind of presume that would certainly be a non-pecuniary interest as we're not taking any decision this evening, and therefore there's no kind of conflict that would arise because we're purely kind of taking an item to note. I'm however happy to look to Sean on that point if there's anything else that we should be taking action on.
Chair, I fully agree. Sorry, Lucy.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, I agree. It's some pecuniary interest. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think we'll go on that. And thank you, Councillor Rice. We'll note that item. So we'll move then to item 5, which is COVID-19, financial and budget implications. And Sean Clark is going to take us through this report.
Finally off of mute. Thank you, Chair. So I'm Sean Clark. I'm the Corporate Director of Finance, Governance and Property for the Council. And this report was in response to a request from the Chair for an update on how COVID has affected Council's finances this year. So in terms of the summary, I'll take you through some of the detail, obviously, but in terms of the summary, the Council, the financial impacts are both direct, in terms of direct expenditure linked to COVID and services. There are more indirect, which is, for instance, loss of income through fees and charges and the like. There is a third aspect, which is the work that the council has taken on behalf of government in terms of distributing grants and the like and trying to support businesses. And then there is another impact, which is looking into next year about the ongoing impacts of COVID running over from this year. Overall, and it's within the executive summary, we forecast at the moment, this is based on everything I say here. I should actually point out there are so many assumptions in this because nobody knows how lockdown is going to totally finish, what will be the impact on services and people will they, how they will act and so on. Into future months, but this is largely based on a 4-month position, and then works on the fact of gradually coming out of lockdown. And with that, we can see from the report there is an overall direct impact on the council of 9.7 million, and we've received 9.2 million in grants to actually support the council in that position. So at the moment, it's cost the council in the region of £500,000. The longer this goes on, though, obviously that bill will go up, and at this time we've heard nothing more from government in terms of further financial support. That isn't to say there won't be any. So, taking through the report, we have managed to increase reserves as at the 31st of March 2020. So we've maintained the £11 million position, but we've also increased our financial resilience reserves to provide additional support for any form of resilience. We'd started doing those knowing there would be government funding reforms a couple of years ago, but now actually we can see that they could actually be used to support any COVID pressures should we need them to. So again, we've managed to increase that, and we have a financial resilience reserve £6 million now, on top of the £11 million general fund going through.
Sorry, Sean, I lost the connection slightly as you were stating the financial resilience reserve number there. Could you just repeat that, please?
Yeah, we've got financial resilience reserve now that stands at £6 million, and that is in addition to the general fund balance of 11 million.
Thank you.
I'm taking through the report in the order that it's written. First of all, we just wanted to set out the government support that's come through. As I pointed out earlier, some of that has come to the council in terms of £9.2 million to cover its own costs. But then there has been other money that's been passported through to us to support both businesses through business rate grants, a hardship fund to provide further discounts for all of those on the local council tax scheme, as well as funding to support the opening of high streets and for care homes in terms of cleanliness and so on. The government has also supported councils through deferral of payments to them of business rates. That is a deferral. It's not a reduction. It's not a discount. It just means that we don't have to pay till later in the year, and that's a recognition of the fact that they know it's going to be more difficult for us to actually claim business rates and so on at the moment, which we then obviously have to pay across. So that is a direct support to our cash flow. There's been £12.3 billion worth of grant support to rural and small businesses, as well as the leisure, hospitality, leisure sectors. And the council has been making those payments out to the first tranche of businesses that fall under those categories over the first couple of months. And just over a week ago, we then launched a secondary scheme, which is the discretionary business grant scheme. And we should be able to start making payments to that at some point next week. So far, in terms of directly supporting our businesses, there are 2,401 businesses that will pay no business rates in 2021 due to the business rate discounts. And a grant scheme in total has meant that we've now paid out over 1,600 grants at the tune of about £20 to £21 million directly to those organisations. I mentioned a discretionary scheme, of which we've been allocated 1.237 million to allocate to those businesses that do not pay business rates, and it might be that they have an area of a larger premises and their rent absorbs everything, so they weren't known to us on the business rate process. Coming into the general fund impact, adult social care and children's social care. There's a number of examples down there about how money has been spent, but it's all been about resilience. The care homes and the care market have been under a great deal of pressure. Care homes themselves have got less people actually going in, not wanting to go into care homes because there's the perceived risk, etc. And so their income is down, putting their financial model very much at risk, but equally increased costs due to PPE rather, and other costs trying to cover staffing issues. And community shielding, Jackie can possibly answer a few more questions on this later if there are any, but we obviously set up High House to start supporting vulnerable, set up a call centre to be able to support those vulnerable residents as well. This report states 9,500 residents, but I understand that's well over 10,000 now that we've been supporting through phone hostels and emotional support and so on as well. And that's been very much done in partnership and actually led quite considerably by the voluntary sector within Thurrock. Children's services I touched on is largely around, again, placements and ensuring that the market was resilient and we had capacity. Just working down. Managing the household waste and recycling centre. There's had to be some traffic impact around there in the costs of managing those sort of processes. But I think the other aspects I wanted to try and get across here is if you look at paragraph 3.22, some of the questions we've also received have been, well, what about all of the money we're not spending? We must be saving a lot. This isn't happening. That isn't happening. The government instruction has actually been that where we have contracts, that we should actually be fulfilling those contracts financially, because the impact has got to be to ensure that those businesses can survive and that they're there for when we need them. And so even though schools were closed for quite considerable time, we've still been paying a considerable sum, over 80%, of all of the home to school transport costs throughout that time. So there aren't great savings in terms of those larger areas of expenditure either. We move into income. Again, fees and charges. We can look at environmental services, parking planning, children's services, community college. All of the costs are still there. But again, the income is obviously not coming through as the lockdown's been in place. Those restrictions have been restricting movement and therefore the ability to actually create that trading income. So all in all, that brings us to 3.27 and 3 which gives that summary of the £500,000 loss in a net position. Possibly because we have the reserves and we have the financial position, that hasn't concerned me so much. The longer it goes on, obviously, the more concerned we will become. But the impact for me, and it's going to be the larger impact, is going into next year. So apologies for going through a little bit of an accounting lesson here, Chair, but I think it's important to explain something around council tax and business rates. When we set the council tax for the beginning of the year in terms of our budget, we make an estimate about what we think will be collectible the following year. So we would have taken into consideration the amount of local council tax claimants that we had at the time. We would take into consideration what we think our overall collection rates will be, and therefore what our bad debt provision will be. And it's that type of thing. Now, because that can fluctuate considerably, the accounting rules don't look at what you actually collect in year. They say whatever you assumed you're going to collect, you still get for budgetary purposes. So non-collection of council tax, for instance, and so on, is not going to impact us this year. But what the accounting rules then go on to say is that if you have a loss, you've collected less than you believed you would, or a surplus, the other way around, that has to be taken into consideration in the following year. Now, at the moment, we have more local council tax claimants. Several hundred more have come through so far, and with a 75% discount, you can look at that and say each one of those is worth £1,000 worth of lost income to the council through council tax. We haven't been taking particular recovery action at the moment, even if we'd wanted to, and we're not going to in this climate. Ports closed and so on as well. Anyway, so we know that actually our overall collection rates will go down. So there will be actual losses there. And it's got to be clear there that will be a reduction in income, not a deferral, but a reduction in income. So all of those losses, for want of a better phrase, are building up this year, and that will then become immediate cost into next year under current accounting rules. We collect £70 million in council tax. So every 1% we don't collect, there's another £700,000, and we can easily see how that could be 3, 4, 5%. Again, have that amount in local council tax scheme claimants. Again, you can easily get up to another million there and so on. So you can see how easily it could build up. So that'll be an impact on next year. We've then got to make a call when we actually set the budget again in February. Well, will everybody have gone back to work? Will our local council tax scheme numbers have gone back down to what they were originally? Or will they still be high? Is employment going to bounce back so quickly? I can't be sure of that at this stage. I wouldn't have thought so. All indications are that they won't. Same with business rates. Will all of the businesses survive this and actually quite a few businesses will actually be able to go in for rate reductions as well. So again, next year we'll look at that and say, well, how much are we going to collect in business rates and council tax? It's likely to be a lot less than we estimated. So again, not only are we actually having to carry this year's losses forward into next year, but then we're going to have more losses next year on the base. So it's a double hit. Now that can easily run into several £1 million. How much that's really going to be, I've no idea yet. Could it be 5 million? Could it be 10 million? Could it be 15 million? It could be any of those figures. And then the only way out of that is then to look through what government might do. Do I believe that, because this isn't just Thurrock, this is every council in the country. Do I think that the government will provide financial support to all of those? If they do, it won't be in full. So already we're looking at what we're going to need to actually do to try and balance the budgets into next year as well, as trying to concentrate on this year. So in this report, the biggest threat for me and the largest area for people to take away is that uncertainty, but certainly the impact on next year. Very briefly on housing revenue accounts, we're beginning to see arrears build up. The way, again, universal credit works is there used to be a transfer straight from the benefit system into the rent system. If anyone was receiving support, now that's not the case. Universal credit gets paid straight to a tenant in arrears, and it's for those tenants to then make payment. And at this time, with the hardship that we can see and so on, you can see that that's becoming more difficult, and we can see arrears beginning to creep up within housing. Of course, that's their main source. Finally, just to touch on capital programme. The capital programme, as certain projects stand, it's still too early to say what the overall impact has been. Certain contractors have had to put in social distancing measures and other measures, maybe come off site, but the financial impact of that hasn't flowed through yet. But equally, because of the overall pressures that the council's facing, we're going to have to look at the capital programme now, as has been agreed, and look to see what actually urgently needs to carry on or what could be deferred for a while to avoid the cost of having to fund those programmes. That's another piece of work which we're looking at. All very early stages. This is a snapshot. I've got to apologise, I haven't got all the answers for the committee now, but it's the start of a conversation I think that we'll be having over the coming months. That's it, Chair, for a moment.
Thanks very much, Sean, and thank you for for a very kind of early stages report. What is an incredibly comprehensive view of the impact on the council's wider finances and the pressures that we're going to face over the next few years. I think clearly this is a very sobering view of what those pressures are going to look like and the scale of the challenge that we're going to face over coming years. Clearly, this is not something that's going to go with lockdown, potentially in a couple of months. We're talking about many years of impact on the council's finances. I guess the kind of the first piece I wanted to come to is just to kind of follow up on something you said in terms of where we feel like that gap will be moving into next financial year. Are we talking about a gap of, granted we're talking about current estimates, this is all very kind of early days, but as members, in terms of preparing ourselves for the types of level of gap that we're going to have to try and close in the budget, would you say that kind of central estimate of around £10 million is about right on current sort of run rate without kind of any further mitigation from the government?
I would think that 10 million is a reasonable estimate. It's an estimate I'm working to at the moment, but I have to say, don't hold me to that. The views are changing constantly. Every time we watch a briefing in the evening, we wait to see what's happening next, and that could have an impact on what we're talking about here.
Okay. And I guess the next part of that then is in terms of that government support. I think you indicated that there's been no kind of further announcement from the government that they might help to meet that wider gap beyond the kind of the 9.2 million we've seen already. As a council, are we kind of in contact with the government in terms of making request for that to be for that additional funding to be provided? and I guess just making sure that our voice is heard when we come to look at how we close that gap.
So it's timely. All councils at the moment every month have to put in a financial return back to the MHCLG, to spell out the pressures that we're facing, and we've been clear right from the outset that actually are as bad as the pressures are this year, they're going to be worse next year. I mentioned council tax and business rates for next year, but I think all of the work that's been done on adult social care, for instance, around the resilience of the market, some of that will be temporary, but some of that will be permanent going forward now, adding further pressures as well. So we've been putting back in the responses to MHCLG. 2 weeks ago, I was on Q&A with the finance director of the MHCLG and asked a question about support into next year specifically. And actually this afternoon we had a phone call just between Thurrock and the MHCLG on that same matter and the overall pressures that we're facing. So we're constantly in touch and we're constantly pushing across.
Thank you. I'd certainly argue very strongly that anything we can do to make sure that government helps to meet that gap rather than it falling on the kind of shoulders of Thurrock residents would be very, very welcome. So I'll move on then to some more general points around the costs that we've incurred. I think the report laid out that those costs, the £9.7 million of direct costs, are for this financial year. I know you talked about us building up our reserves to £11 million and then £6 million for the financial resilience reserve in the last financial year. But presumably as well, there were, despite that kind of building up, there were also kind of COVID-related costs we incurred before the new financial year.
They were fairly minor. They were fairly minor in the grand scheme. The majority of the costs were the first larger costs were certainly linked into the adult social care resilience side of aspects, and that they were able.
Thank you. So moving on then, do we see any particular impact on the council's investments that are being felt through the current crisis? No. I think I did put that in the report, and I'm taking a report to Standards and Audit certainly in July at the request of the Chair. At the moment, all of the indications that we're getting and assurances back from the various different people we invest with are that our investments are not impacted. Where we've seen problems in the MHCLG, for instance, and seen problems throughout the country are those ones that have been more linked to the commercial properties such as retail parks and shopping centres and the like, whereas actually all of the renewable energy market hasn't been affected. So all returns are on target and all returns are safe at this stage. Thank you. And good to hear that there's a paper going forward to Standards and Audit. I think that would be very helpful to consider the position with investments in more detail. So I'll move on then to paragraph 2.6. Paragraph 2.6 just notes that the council has frozen non-essential spend. I wonder if you could give us maybe some examples of areas where we have stopped spending based on the kind of the need to ensure we don't spend anything non-essential and kind of what sort of services that covers.
This is going to be quite general because, like I said earlier as well, a lot of our contracted spend we've had to continue spending even though we haven't been receiving the benefit. Mm-hmm. So, Jackie may wish to comment on part of this or may not, but it was, for instance, even around recruitment. Recruitment has continued, but what we're trying to say is that if that post is not absolutely essential to dealing with the pressure that we're facing right now, then there's no need to continue that recruitment. So we've left it largely in directors' hands to make their own choices around what they consider essential and not.
Thanks, Sean. So the next bit I just wanted to come to was at paragraph 3.24. And we are looking at the issue of Thurrock regeneration spending. One of the things that the report notes is that there's impact from returns from projects that would have started in this financial year, but it also indicates that there are some pressures from the last financial year rolled forward into this financial year, and it sounds like those are pressures that are not particularly COVID related. So I wondered, do we know what that split in terms of that financial impact is of 2.4 million between those things that are directly delayed through COVID-19 and those things that were sort of previously sort of slow running or cancelled projects that are driving that kind of rolled over financial impact?
Yeah, I mean, the pressure for last year was reported. It was 1.3 million from Thurrock Regeneration Limited. And as we say, coming into this year, that price is up to 2.4.
See, so of that 2.4, approximately 1.3 million is existing, and then 1.1 million sort of additional pressures from COVID.
But that also assumes that the certain progress will be taken further this year. If that isn't, then obviously that grows as well. This is the whole point around, you know, we're only really looking at 4 months at the moment.
Thank you. I think with that then I'll open to the rest of the committee to come in with their questions, and I'll ask first of all Councillor Duffin.
Thank you very much. Firstly, I'd just like to put on record again, as I've done in the past, a massive thank you to Sean Clark and his team around investments. I would hate to consider what position we're being in without them and the money that brings into the council. Obviously, there's been lots of work in the past around leaders, deputy leaders of groups could turn up to meetings whenever they wanted and hear the updates, so it was transparent and people were kept in the loop. I was just wondering now, obviously with lockdown, everything going on, obviously maybe it's not CSR in the form it was in, but is processes still being kept in place? Obviously, as you mentioned before, not too many new investments going on where everything's there, but is the stuff that was in the past and was really good and informative still happening?
I think I understood that question, Councillor Duffin. Yeah, I mean, we're not advancing any further ones. All of the ones that the larger ones that were new along the lines of the investment strategy were reported as we went through. At this stage, we're not taking any more forward. But should they do so, then the investment strategy still stands. Yeah, and we would take that through to members.
Fantastic. Just one other thing, because it's not here, what sort of figures are we bringing in predicted in this sort of financial year for that investment, and what money is that bringing to Thurrock Council?
The surplus from investments at the moment are in the region of 33 to 35 million.
Fantastic. Just thank you very much for your work. Oliver covered nearly all the questions I could possibly think of, so I don't have too much more to add. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Duffin. Councillor Churchman.
Yes, thank you, Chair. No, I'd like to thank the officers for doing what they're doing, and we are living in unprecedented times. But I'd like to just point out, you know, that I think you've answered a lot of the questions that I would like to ask. But you know, as I said, it's unprecedented times, and just keep doing what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Haig.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for the presenting the paper, Sean. That's really helpful. So I just want to pick up regarding the small business grants, and I'm just interested to hear your comments on really how's been marketed locally to local companies, and also whether you're confident that all those should be applying or qualify are actually doing so.
Yeah, it's been a real challenge. The biggest area, so there are 3 areas that are available, or 3 categories available for grants. Those ones in the hospitality industry with rateable values between 15 and 51,000, they've largely all been paid. There are some that that are not interested in receiving those payments, but they could be like, for instance, the McDonald's of these worlds and the Boots and the high streets and so on. There's then those that receive what they call rural rate relief, and they've largely all been paid out as well. The biggest area we've got issues with are those that receive the small business rate relief. And that really just shows up. I will use the word inadequacies, I think, of the system over the years. And this again isn't Thurrock Council, this is national. For over a decade now, small businesses with rates of 15,000 or less have received 100% discount. Now, the issue with that is if you get a bill through the door which is saying you don't owe anything, even if you've changed, if the business has changed hands or it's changed owners or anything like that, there's not always an emphasis on somebody to actually contact us and test. And so, we're trying to actually get out to a number of businesses that are on our system that we don't normally deal with. We just send an invoice for nothing, zero out to, and trying to actually get a number of those to engage have been quite difficult. So as of the end of last week, there were still 300 of those businesses that, if they all still exist, and we believe the majority of them do, would all actually be eligible for £10,000 grants each. So we're still marketing that quite excessively. We've been trying to contact each of those businesses through a variety of medium, not just through the websites, but through the business board, through letters, through emails, through texts, through phone calls, to try and get engagement. But as of last week, there were 300 that have not communicated with us at all, which is a shame. So we're trying different views to try and actually get contact with those to make those grants.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. It's quite a number, so hopefully you can get some engagement there. But just on a similar vein, on this discretionary scheme, how's that going so far?
It's actually going to be oversubscribed. I mean, the basis of the discretionary schemes, we've been given a set amount of money, whereas the first scheme we were given payment on account, but it was quite clear. If you fell into this category, you got £10,000. If you fell into that category, you got £25,000. And then later in the year, there'll be a reconciliation back to government to actually say, like, we paid you this, you paid that out. You either owe us or we owe you. So that's quite clear, and it's easy. This one is 1.237 million we've been paid to set up our own scheme. The government also said, you can make payments of 25,000, you can make payments of 10,000, or you can make payments of any other amount. But you don't know what the demand is, because these people aren't on a system. They're not on your business rate system. So we don't know who they are, and it includes the businesses, as I said, that might be renting out space within Sainsbury's. It can include some of the food outlets within Into and the likes, but we've no idea of the overall amount. And so you couldn't turn around and say, right, we are going to give £10,000 out to each person that actually comes forward and requests, because we could be paying out £2-3 million, even though we've only been given 1.2. So we put it up. So we've done it in two stages. We've said that the first tranche is open for 2 weeks, finishes towards the end of this week, I believe. What we'll do with that is we'll allocate £1 million out of the money. We will then effectively look at what their overall costs are to create a pro rata basis to then allocate the £1 million out in full to those businesses. Now, the reason why we've had to do it in 2 tranches is until we know how many businesses coming forward, we can't then work out how much we're paying. And therefore, the businesses are having to wait even longer before we can make that payment. So we said we'll give everybody 2 weeks to come forward. We'll make that payment then, but then we'll actually create a second tranche for those businesses that didn't apply within the first 2 weeks. So it wasn't just one chance at all. We'll then look again at that second tranche, depending on how many come through. And if nobody in second tranche can earn more than the people in first tranche, we put that in as a rule. But actually, if there is unspent funding, we will then go back over the first tranche as well, and we'll reallocate that funding to pay out to try and maximise those payments out so that we don't pay everything out. So that's been the approach we've taken.
Yeah, no, thanks. It's very difficult. I know. Obviously, this money is so important to keep these small companies viable at any time. So, yeah, I can't imagine there's much more you could do, really, Sean. So I guess you're giving it your best shot. It's not a perfect situation in terms of identifying the companies and getting them to come forward. But yeah, no, thanks for that. That's really helpful.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ralph?
Hi, Sean. Yeah, I welcome the report. During a time where all councils across the country seem to have their heads stuck in the vice over COVID, I was looking at the financial resilience of Thurrock Council, and I was just wondering how you've been able to increase the reserves of that amount, and how it's created that financial reserves that we have.
We've been sorry, Chair, for you. We've been forecasting in the budget setting every year surpluses. That's going to largely be down to certainly the 33 to 35 million we were talking about in investment income and so on. That's allowed us to not just maintain services but enhance them, equally then to provide those surpluses which were intended to go into a lot of other growth areas and so on as well, in terms of, say, the additional piece and the like. But we've also managed to take some of that and Cabinet, although they had allocated, have also given up some of those members' allocations, if you like, to actually put into the resilience reserve, knowing about COVID. So it's largely because of surpluses that we've been able to generate in the last couple of years.
Just sort of clarify, is that also the investments that we've put in, the investment approaches generated that resilience that we've been able to spend on other stuff as well, that's funded other projects?
That's certainly the largest aspect, Councillor. I mean, we've obviously been looking across the board at reducing expenditure where we can for other efficiencies through maximising all fees and charges, but by far the largest contributor would have been through the investment approach.
Councillor Rice.
Yes, Chair, I've got a couple of questions. Sean, the first one is the £41 million overspend on the A13. Is that in the current year, or will that be assumed in the next financial year? Could you explain that to us?
Any overspend within the A13 or any capital project, for the A13, certainly it's not going to be in this financial year. The actual spend will go into towards the end completion of the project. So we're covered in terms of our costs for this year, but any overspend, as I say, picked up next year. We will then continue to seek additional grant funding, as we've already done through SELEP, and then we'll be left with if we can't, whether we can't meet for other third-party contributions, we will look to fund through either capital receipts or through prudential borrowing. If we prudentially borrow, the impact of that is then the year after the actual spend took place.
Sure.
So we'll be looking at probably 22, 23.
Right. And the other question, Sean, Councillor Haigh touched on it, the cost of the discretionary business scheme you put together. Obviously, you'd be aware that several people have approached me, in particular dry cleaners. In particular, dry cleaners in Sainsbury's. How many more businesses have we got like that are not on the National Business Register, but are paying service charges through large companies and are falling through the net? Do we have any figures surrounding that?
We don't at the moment, but we will. We should be able to at least give an indication of that when the grant scheme closes. What I know is within the first days of our scheme going live, over that first weekend, we had over 100 applicants coming through, including one you're talking about and you're referring to, Councillor Rice, that I'm well aware of.
Yes.
And And that's why I'm saying about the oversubscribing, because if people are expecting, say, £10,000 grants, for instance, and we've only got £1 million, then that 100 already takes up at £10,000 that million. There would be more coming through this week. I'm sorry, I didn't pick up the latest figures before this meeting. But again, in a future update, we'll certainly share that information, and quite possibly the members' update briefings that Aaron puts out.
And obviously, going through that, will the government contribute to that funding aspect? Because, for instance, if the local authorities' exposure is 2 to 3 or 4 million pounds, and we've only set aside about £1 million, we'll obviously be substantially short of monies. So will we be able to get some money out of central government?
No, so sorry if I didn't explain that very well. We are limited to the amount of money we have of 1.237 million. The government supplied us that amount of money. And that is the limit that they've put on us. That's why actually we can't just say that we'll pay people 10,000, 25,000. We need to see what the demand is and then work out a fair amount to pay.
Yes. Okay. And the final question would be around the pubs and restaurants. Do we have any conclusion on how many pubs and restaurants in the Thurrock area that will be affected by COVID and the financial exposure to the council?
There's two questions there, I think, isn't there? In terms of the amount of pubs and restaurants, etc., I haven't got those figures. Again, we can look to get those. I think, again, in the future briefing, what we'll do as well is we'll split down categories of who we've paid grants out to, so you can see where the support has been given. In terms of those that we've got exposure to, it's actually quite limited. In terms, we don't have many pubs nowadays on our asset books that pay us rent. The impact will be for us about future business rates. So whereas at the moment, actually, it's not normally a pressure for us this year, because the government has given 100% business rate relief to the majority of those. What we don't know is whether they're going to survive when furloughing finishes and those other pressures into next year. And that could be, so that the impact of us will be business rates, whether that's going to be achieved next year.
Okay, right. Well, thank you very much, Sean, and thank you for your good work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Just two more questions from me then. So first of all, paragraph 3.10 and 3.11 just talks about the work that was done in Thurrock, particularly around Thurrock coronavirus community action, and it lists the total cost of some of the operation where the local authority stepped in to fill any gaps linked to food deliveries of around £250,000. I wonder, do we have any breakdown of what makes up those costs, or is that just a total figure that we're given?
So I'm still not on mute. I haven't got the full breakdown. What I know is there was considerable purchases of essential goods and food for a significant amount of people, although the announcement came out about food boxes and so on to the vulnerable people. That took actually quite a lot longer to implement than the government had originally considered. So we stepped in ahead of it and actually funded those ourselves. There have also been rental costs, I'm sure, for High House, because we use that as a base to actually operate out of. And we also had to set up a call centre to be able to support that whole operation as well. I'm not sure if Jackie's got anything to add to that or not. She's nodding, so she seems okay.
Thanks, Sean. I guess the second point, building somewhat on the questions from Councillor Haigh and Councillor Rice, in terms of the wider impact on Thurrock businesses and the jobs of residents, I guess we've talked a lot about the need to regenerate the borough in the last 10 years. It feels almost now that there's a need to reconstruct the economy of the borough locally. And I wonder, what's the kind of what's the thinking in terms of how we address that challenge? Is there any kind of strategic framework through the council that we are taking on to look at how we reconstruct the kind of the borough's economy in the sort of the aftermath of coronavirus, or is it sort of subsumed into sort of just the working of the council anyway? So I guess what I'd like to hear is that we are really taking the lead on this in the borough and making sure that we've got a strong plan for how we protect the borough's economy.
Well, Jackie's just put her hand up to answer this one. So I'll start. There are a number of different avenues going through. So Andy Millard, Director of Police, has certainly been working very much more on economic development recovery plans, equally looking at regeneration and so on. Now, we talked, if I look at it financially, we talked earlier about the capital programme. And part of my discussion with MHCLD today was that we're trying to look at the budget at the moment in three segments. I'm finding it easier to look at it that way. Years 1 to 2, years 3 to 5, years 6 to 10. And the discussion with MHCLG today was partly around the support has got to be with us, certainly more in the first year or two than further down the line. Because we can't be put in a position, not just Thurrock, but any council, to make short-term decisions now that will be damaging. Whereas for me, I look and think, well, you know, we get investments from Oland. The biggest income streams we've got are business rates. It is people being in work and employment, you know, to reduce down the local council tax scheme. So I would look for what support can come, and we've seen other support, high street funds and the like, you know, to actually help kickstart economies, and not actually, you know, drag us back, you know, because we've got normal financial pressures with the rest of the work that we do as a council. So it's certainly our thinking, certainly something that, as I say, I've spoken to MHCLG about this afternoon, about needing to do that. What that actually looks like is probably a better conversation for Andy Millard, you know, his aspect, but financially, certainly whatever we can do to support businesses out there, to support education, re-education where necessary, those people that may have lost their jobs, you know, and that direct support, you know, needs to be there.
Thank you, Sean. I think before I come on to recommendations, I'll just ask whether or not anyone else in the committee wants to ask any further final questions.
Can I just come in with one? It's more just a bit extra information, Sean. The difference between the General Fund Reserve and the Financial Resilience Reserve, are they effectively the same thing, or is there a difference?
You can. They can both be used for the same things. I think psychologically, it used to be 8 million, and we moved up to 11 million, and there were calculations behind that as to how you come to 11 million, and it would be linked into bad debt, for instance. It'd be linked into other inflationary pressures and all of those sorts of aspects. So that is a level that we said we should not go under. But if we needed to, during COVID, go into that 11 million, then we could. The 6 million, because actually, you know, as officers and as councillors, you'll be judged if you go into that. Actually, because I don't need to put more into that, that's when we create the other reserves, the financial resilience reserves. They're more usable, they're more flexible because of that. They're there for a purpose, and that's clear. And that provides a divide between, you know, if we have to go into the 11 million, it's because we've spent all of those other financial resilience reserves.
Fantastic, thank you.
Thanks both. Does anyone else want to ask any final questions?
I think Jackie wanted to say something, Chair.
Jackie, did you want to come in?
Yes, I was just going to provide some context on the TCCA dashboard, which we've set up to be produced weekly now in terms of the expenditure there. Food boxes from High House, which have supplemented the national scheme, we've delivered over 500 of those, and in total we've had over 3,500 interactions through TCCA. So it's been quite an enterprise really, but it has been very, very well received and has received excellent feedback. So it was definitely a worthwhile investment.
Thank you, Jackie. I think then if no one else wants to...
I say, Chair, I believe Councillor Head would like to see if he could comment.
Yeah, I'll call Councillor Head to speak on this one.
Thanks, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Yeah, you can hear me. Good. There's nodding heads. There's two words that have come out of tonight, which I think we probably walked into this meeting knowing were going to be the case, but it's kind of reinforced it, and that is unprecedented and sobering. I think without a doubt, the coming time is going to be full of collaborative effort that's going to be needed to make sure that we can secure the best of outcomes as we go forward. And ultimately, obviously, there is the discussion about approaching government. Like Sean's articulated, that conversation is happening quite regularly, very regularly. But I think we are going to have to face some degree of reality that there are likely to have to be some service reforms that are required. I think that's going to imply a sense of collaboration. At the moment, this image of what Sean's put together and his team, which is quite a black art, Sean, in its own right, because we don't know all the answers. It's based on a few months rather than what the long term could be. We don't know how quick the economy will start and will it really start into its full sense. After this period of time, it could be that the economy is still stifled well into next year, which will have a direct impact on fees and charges if social behaviours don't change as people sort of relax their views on things. So it is definitely very much a fluid picture. And I just want to sort of recognise the committee for having a very level discussion tonight on this, because ultimately there are going to be people out there that ask what does not necessarily this year but next year mean for them. Whether it be staff or residents, people will generally ask that. So obviously it's really great of the committee to make sure that sort of it's been a sensitive discussion. And sort of similar can be said of the upcoming standards and audit conversation in regards to the investment report. I think it's absolutely critical that members continue to make inquiries and choose to engage in processes like CSR, in fact, and appropriate with things that we make, because we have to recognise the full regard of the commercial nature of what we're talking about. But going back to the whole piece around working together, if you remember, Chair, we gave a commitment and we kind of cross-party agreed this, that there would be an increased level of cross-party and VCS effort in terms of service reviews and everything going on, you might remember. Still, although the political dynamic might have changed in Thurrock, I think the intention is still very much to do that, Chair, because going back to the point about this being an unprecedented situation, I'm hopeful that everyone would choose to engage in those processes, because ultimately we've got to make sure that we have the right outcomes for residents in an unprecedented situation. I think we can probably best go about that collaboratively, and hopefully the spirit of what I've just said has been come across as well-meaning, and I hope the committee choose to sort of engage moving forward in that process.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ebb, and certainly welcome your kind of comments and your kind of attendance at this meeting. I think that's very well appreciated by the committee to hear that directly. I think just before we move to recommendation, I'd certainly have kind of a couple of areas that it would be good for us to, I guess, take back as feedback in terms of the discussion that we've had. I think, first of all, it seems critical that we make that ask to government, and we keep asking that we meet as much of that gap as possible through central funding. There are clearly some very difficult times ahead, and I think the more that can fall on government shoulders rather than directly through onto the shoulders of Thurrock residents, I think that will be much appreciated. The second is that, as I said earlier, I think there's a clear need to have a combined effort on how we run the reconstruction effort on Thurrock's economy, and make sure we've got a very clear view on that as council, and make sure that we're kind of leading the way on not letting Thurrock fall behind economically because of the wider fallout of the coronavirus crisis. And finally, I guess I would look to both Sean and Councillor Hebb in terms of how we regularly review and look at what are admittedly sort of initial numbers in terms of the impact, but Sean, Councillor Hebb, it would certainly be good to hear regular feedbacks as the year progresses on the kind of the latest view on the economic impact on the council, how we're building through to the 2021-22 budget setting process, and make sure that this committee's got as full a view of that as possible as we go forward. And so I'll just look to Councillor Heb and to Sean for just sort of confirmation on those points.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, Sean, that was brief but concise. Yes, the answer is yes. We've already mentioned about the government sort of reach out. That effort will continue. Like I say, I think we are going to have to face some reality that we are going to have to do some stuff ourselves. But yes, going back to it, Councillor Gerrish, absolutely want people to be involved. We're in unprecedented times. Politically, it would be easy for us just to do what we need to do, but it's right that we engage to get the right outcomes. And that doesn't mean just members. If you remember, one of your successors, Councillor Pothecary, made the comment about the BCS sector for the budget last year. So we also need to look at an innovative way, Councillor Gerrish, to also engage in these processes. But yes, in terms of regular updates, absolutely.
Thank you very much, both. Does any other councillor want to make any last remarks before we go to recommendations?
Yes, Chair. Can I just ask Sean one final question? Can you tell us, Sean, the income of the Thurrock Regeneration Limited?
In terms of how much we're receiving or how much we're losing?
How much we're actually getting in?
I'd need to write to you with that one, Councillor Rice. I'm not quite sure what the overall position is at the moment. We're certainly making money still out of the Thurrock Regeneration Limited.
Yes.
They owe us money still from St Chad's,
Yes.
which was part of the business plan, and that's fine. Those properties are being rented, and the income stream is still sound.
Yes. Yes.
But I can't think off the top of my head exactly what that figure is.
Perhaps you could just email the whole committee, Sean.
Yeah, happy to do so.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Thank you, Sean. And Sean, I think just to place on record again, I think it reflects the whole committee, but thanks for the work that you are doing on this and for the comprehensive update. I know that this committee always appreciates the detail that you can give to the committee in terms of our financial situation. So thank you for that.
Okay, thank you.
Our committee happy then to agree recommendation 1.1 that we note the assumptions and financial implications as set out in the report.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, all. That is agreed. And so we will move on then to item number 6, which is the impact of COVID-19 on the current Agile working programme. And I believe we're going to have Jackie Hinchcliffe to introduce this item.
Yes, it's me back again. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the report was requested, I think, probably for quite obvious reasons in terms of the amount of change that the organisation had to go through in a relatively straightforward, relatively short space of time, alongside everybody else who was affected by obviously the lockdown. The report sets out the background to Agile Working. Agile Working has been a transformation programme within council for some time. Some people will remember the reconfiguration and redesign of Civic Office really for phase 1 of the overall transformation programme. The Agile Working programme which we currently have running pre-COVID was refreshed in December 2019. Using all the learning that we'd acquired from the original approach, and we were focusing on 3 key themes, which were technology, workspace and culture. The report contains sort of the overview in terms of what that all meant, what we were focusing on, and also the sort of key principles that were underpinning that transformation programme. I'll be open. We did have challenges with it. There were a number of exercises undertaken, a number of trials and pilots to actually assess the potential of Agile Working within different services that were currently based in our office locations. And through that process, we'd identified a number of barriers that we needed to overcome to progress proper agile working. The agile working, I suppose it's worth saying as well, that we refer to is not necessarily home working. So agile working can actually mean anywhere. It's remote working. It's not coming to an office to conduct the work you would normally do each day. And then lockdown arrived. I would have to say, setting aside all of the issues and the sadness and the challenges that this COVID pandemic has presented, I think to all of us, is that what it's also demonstrated is that we do have an ability to change and adapt and transform that potentially that would have been embraced as enthusiastically had this pandemic not hit us. So what happened really, really quickly, and I think what was amazing response by the council, some of which is sort of showcased within section 4 of the report, is how quickly we managed to adapt. Having spoken to colleagues in other authorities, actually the way that we managed that, the way we delivered that for people, actually surpassed a lot of other councils, especially larger councils that react much slower. The report sort of demonstrates the amazing work, and everyone's mentioned it, of our IT team. You know, they have their challenges, and you know, they struggle as well to get people to embrace some of the new technology that we were already rolling out as part of the digital programme. But the situation reversed from people saying, no, this will not work for our services, to how quickly can we have this because we need it now. You know, I'm going to mention a few small wind-ups at Directors Board where Sean and I were sort of indicating that we'd have got really told that there was no way that we could undertake this level of change had we suggested it as a transformation programme or an IT programme. But actually roles were reversed and people were demanding that it was done much quicker. So we had a rollout of additional kit that was procured and allocated to individuals. Everyone will now be very familiar with Teams, which we're operating this meeting on, which was already partly rolled out, but massively fast-tracked to enable people to function. I think that's another overriding message of what we've achieved as a council, in that apart from the services that for all sorts of reasons we had to close, we had to shut down because it wasn't safe to continue to do them, the council has continued to function and operate and deliver the majority of what we deliver. So, I mean, everyone needs to be commended in that. One of the big challenges we had in the original programme was our telephony solutions. And they were quite a barrier to people being able to work from home. But the IT team not only identified the solutions that we needed, some of which we'd already started to identify, but actually had rolled out full telephony solutions. And it wasn't just one solution, it was all done in less than a week. So by the end of the first week, all calls coming into the council were seamlessly being answered in people's homes, including hump groups, so that actually the residents and customers didn't notice any difference. Not only that, we also managed to, we've already mentioned it, set up TCCA, and that required another solution that provided mobile phones to those people who we redeployed to support that contact centre, with technology that enabled those mobile phones to hump group, so that the most vulnerable people who were trying to get in contact with us would definitely get an answer and a response. An added benefit was also the massive reduction in printing that we've achieved. It's extraordinary. We've gone from being an organisation that couldn't cope with printing anything and everything to one that can. Now, essentially, everyone's printing everything at home, but I'm hoping not. I'm hoping that some people, you know, have really got on board and are managing to work digitally. For the cultural side, and this was obviously a big concern, especially of mine and my team, we recognise that people had gone from being in a social working environment to potentially some people being isolated alone at home, especially those members of staff that are potentially at higher risk or shielding. We very quickly had to put in place a whole range of support packages that are available online, digitally, to support those people, and actually encouraged, it's been quite well taken up, lots of ways of replacing that social interaction through digital means. And teams and individuals have been massively innovative as well. I mean, there's all sorts of quizzes, and you'll be doing it yourselves in your social life happening, but you know, it's not just meetings we're using the technology for, it's actually so people can just have a chat if they need to. And we encourage that massively. And we also progress our e-learning agenda extraordinarily. So that potentially will become one of the reductions in spend, because the more we can drive online in learning, the less commission on site learning. So it was a massive operation. It was a massive exercise. I think probably like us, those first 3 to 4 weeks, I'm not sure many people slept a lot with the transition, and actually I'm trying to make sure that we did support everyone we needed to support, including our workforce. So big, the question is how do we sustain the benefits? We've achieved a massive amount. We've shown that we can work differently. And one of the big messages that we're conveying across the organisation is that we won't be going back to where we were. You know, we've demonstrated we can work by taking not so much a default position, but actually a far more remote position. And what we're looking at now is as we move into recovery, actually how we manage to accommodate that and build into our planning that we can work differently. I mean, the potential upside is we don't need as much civic office as we've got. So in building some of the financial resilience that Sean needs to look at, you know, do we look at potential less space in civic office for Thurrock staff and actually more for available for commercial rent? You know, do we bring partners in? So there's lots of opportunities, and at the moment I think we're very much on the cusp of the pandemic is still happening, and we've got the majority of staff working extraordinarily hard to protect vulnerable people. I think what I did mention as part of the TCCA dashboard is it's taken a while, but at the moment we're at over 10,000 people who are classified as category A in Thurrock, and that's quite a big proportion compared to some others, which would suggest, you know, we've got some real health challenges and vulnerability challenges, and we've got, you know, a lot of our workforce supporting those people. What we're building into our sort of planning and recovery phase at the moment is how we adapt to the new ways of working and make sure we embed those and don't go back. Initially, in the short term, that's going to be having to look at how we begin to reoccupy our office environment, but with social distancing, which obviously still gives us the opportunity to capitalise on more flexible and remote working. And in the longer term, what does that look like in the long term? As part of this, I have to acknowledge that home working doesn't work for some people. So even though technically their jobs can be done at home, there may be other reasons why that's not feasible. You know, they're in a big family, they're siblings, there's all sorts of reasons. You know, we don't all sit in dedicated offices in houses that are relatively peaceful. So we have to acknowledge that. We have to build that into how we manage the risk assessments for individuals and services coming back. But I think overall, we have to acknowledge the way that all of this change and transition was embraced, and how people have worked differently, how we've worked massively differently with the voluntary sector. The partnership between ourselves and CVS to set up and run TCCA. We're already working with Christina in terms of how we can how we can actually make sure that some of that continues. I should probably shut up. I've spoken for too long, but yeah, it's a massive opportunity for the organisation, and one that we must build into our planning of how we go through recovery and then hopefully into reform.
Thank you very much, Jackie, for a really kind of comprehensive report and presentation. I think I'd certainly echo the kind of the thanks that you made there, and that I started the meeting with to officers and staff for all of their hard work in keeping services running. I think there's been a huge effort, and clearly the ways of working has played a very big part of that. I kind of want to start on paragraph 6.3, where we say that we expect to see home working setting as the first choice, the default workspace, which I think is a really kind of bold statement, and I think really reflects the change that we've seen in the attitudes to what work is and how we should do it in organisations across the country as a result of the coronavirus crisis. And I think I sort of personally really welcome that transition, both in terms of effectiveness and ways of working, but also in terms of some of those things that we as a committee and as a council have discussed before, in terms of the environmental footprint of the organisation and actually what it means in terms of how we can make sure that we are playing our part. So I guess building on that, it's a really kind of bold statement. I think a really kind of good view in terms of the right direction for how we think about our approach to agile working. I guess first it would be good to understand what kind of proportion of roles within the organisation you think are suitable for this kind of agile approach, because clearly we can't run all of our services on an agile kind of work from home default assumption. There are things that we have to have frontline staff out there interacting with the community. So I'm keen to sort of understand how you think that kind of split plays out in terms of the kind of the establishment that we've got.
Okay, I mean, if you take the rough numbers of around 2,500 staff, then you could probably say that a third of those are not what I would classify as office-based roles. So, you know, we've got all the care workers, we've got Collins House, we've got waste, we've got environment. In my head, I chunk it down in sort of thirds. So a third of those, third of our roles would be out there, but they're out there working what I would call remotely anyway, because they're in the community and they're providing services directly out there. Civic Office is our sort of main base for office space. There are others, and I always upset people if I think they think I've forgotten some of part of our office estate. But within that, within Civic Office, we've probably got about 1,200 people. Now, in theory, you could take I mean, we are being bold with some of this. I think we have to be professionally courageous to make some of this change stick. All of those roles do not need to take place within the Civic Office. I could start at that, that position. Some of them will do, and that's for different reasons. One, the services, so there needs to be access to people from our residents, our customers. People need to see some of our staff. But also, as I sort of mentioned, there will be a portion of staff who cannot work at home and do not have any other location. So we need to be able to accommodate those in some way. But I think we need to start ambitiously. We always start ambitiously, but this has given us the leverage to really push that and try and sustain some change. And those ambitious messages are the other one is really the sort of mandate that we've had for years is less offices, better services. We don't need to be located in offices to deliver better services. In fact, probably we deliver better services if we're out there delivering. So I would work on 2/3 potentially of our workforce and work in an agile way. But some of them we will have to provide an office space
Thank you very much. And I suppose kind of building on that, the key challenge and the key concern, I guess, that residents will have is how we make sure that this doesn't detrimentally affect the delivery of services, and actually that service quality is still kind of first and foremost in the minds of staff across the council as we experiment with new ways of working. So I guess the question is, how do we ensure that there is still that kind of strong oversight and kind of commitment to service quality through delivering that new way of working?
I think that excellent services and getting it right first time is the sort of the mandate and the values we live by. That underpins everything we do, our vision, our priorities, our values. So that's about embedding our expected behaviours and our expected approach into the workforce. I don't think where and how we work necessarily will change. We could deliver a crap service from within the office just as well as delivering crap service from home. And I think the reverse of that is also true. In terms of managing those outcomes, and that's where a lot of our time and investment needs to be, is actually making sure we're measuring that the right outcomes are being achieved, and the managers are confident in managing outcomes and not just competent about managing the people that they can see on a day-to-day basis. So that's always been a big theme within the Agile Working Programme, because it is a different way of managing. But we've got all of those performance indicators embedded in our framework. We would easily see if cost complaints started going up. We would easily see if member inquiries or member complaints half of residents started going up. So measuring the impact of the change is going to be to do. At the moment, our complaints are going down.
And Jackie, an indicator that we've talked about a lot in the past is staff sickness, and we've always had trouble kind of cracking this one. How do you feel the impact on that metric may be from the new ways working?
Oh, how long can we do this for? Thank you for the question, Chair. Well, I am delighted to report, and I have to say that a lot of this is pre-COVID pandemic. But for the first year last year, the council, through massive effort by managers across the board, achieved an 8.2 average sickness across the organisation. Many people remember, especially those of us that regularly come to corporate O&S committee for a few years, and we've had a target of 9 for about a decade and never achieved it. We've achieved it for the first time. That improved. So we should probably make sure that's highlighted in the minutes. And somehow, what we're doing is we've been closely monitoring, obviously, absence in the organisation since lockdown. Primarily from a well-being position and a critical services position to make sure that we were maintaining the levels that in those frontline services, but also to make sure we were supporting individuals who were reporting absent, who potentially had COVID, certainly then support, to progress testing and make sure that we weren't putting anyone vulnerable in a difficult position. The early indications are we've only had 2 months that the sickness absences remain low. All sorts of reasons to be associated with that. The fact that we're all in lockdown would automatically restrict the spread of any viruses, not COVID. So we'll see the benefits of that. What's also interesting, and we're doing some additional work, is because we've given people lots of opportunities to work differently under pressured situations, because many were homeschooling, children were at home, all sorts going on. But those outputs are being maintained, they're working very differently, working flexibly. And that kind of approach might mean that people do not have to report absent if they're presented with a challenge, because we've allowed that additional flexibility. But yes, I'm delighted to report that the last year. Our absence was below target, and it looks as though that trend at the moment is.
Thanks very much, Jackie. I'm going to open up to the committee then. And Councillor Duffin, did you have any sort of questions or further comments?
Yeah, so firstly, thank you very much for your report and congratulations on hitting the target. And it's bold, and bold is what I want to see. It's what we demand of officers, and it's great to see it's there. So one of the things I wanted to touch on, obviously, Council's going ahead with a rebuild of the council offices, which offers us actually, with what's going on in the world, the increase of agile working from home, working from other locations. My business is going through it, lots of businesses are going through it, but could we look at completely changing the way we want to use the space, because there might be less of a demand now for commercial rent of office space, whereas there might be lots of other things we could offer with that space, and it might be a really, really good opportunity to look at, hey, how can we make sure that any of these space in the buildings that we've got, make sure it's multi-purpose, because who knows, office space in 10 years time might not be stuff there's that much demand for, and where it's timed up perfectly with the final building hasn't been built, that any changes is certainly something. Are we looking at that and sort of options on the table?
Yes, everything is being looked at. I mean, essentially, it's acknowledged at the moment that we will need some kind of civic centre. How much of that needs to be allocated to office space we've yet to determine, and we're not going to be able to determine, obviously, until we're through social distancing. We've accommodated those services that we need to once we've identified them through the risk assessment and those individuals. But once we've sort of established that baseline, we then have the potential to look at utilising the rest of the space in more innovative ways.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Churchman.
Yeah, thank you, Jack. I think this is something some of the big media companies in London, I read, that it's been so successful working from home, they're actually saying to their staff, well, this can be a permanent thing. No, I think it's wonderful. And I think up to now, you've done a great job. I mean, everything that I've put through, I even had a socially distanced visit just to show an office or something. So I don't see where that can change. I think it's a great idea. So carry on the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Haigh.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. That was really helpful. And obviously, like others, commend you, the management team, all the staff on the quick response to COVID, actually keeping the ship moving forward, really, because it was massively challenging. So I've not heard a bad thing, in terms of how the council responding from residents. So I think a fantastic, supreme effort, really, and that's really, really good. So, and just in terms of, better transforming the way we work, I think sometimes a crisis like this can actually bring to the fore opportunity. So there aren't many good things to say about the COVID crisis, but one thing is it might give us a chance to actually accelerate some of these transformation opportunities. So I'm really pleased to hear that you're pushing the boundaries, really. And I guess if you push them, it's easy to come back than if you hadn't actually pushed them in the first place. So I really support the approach. So well done, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your feedback.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ralph.
Hi, Jackie. Fantastic report, and I'm really impressed with what the council have done through this crisis, and especially the IT department have just been fantastic. I've had to use them a few times during this. I don't want to be the party pooper. When we come up to home working, there are negative consequences of it. They include loss of self-identity for staff, long-term mental health problems, and negative impact on physical health for staff. A lot of people come to work as an escape as well from their home life. And I just wondering what monitoring would be on that of the well-being of our staff at home. It's great having a percentage of staff at home, but if we never check on them for their well-being, what guidelines could we put in place for that?
So thank you for that question. Yeah, it's I did reference it in the report, but potentially haven't sort of covered it as comprehensively as I should have done. One of the core streams of this is ensuring the well-being of staff. And I think what this has also shown us is how critically important that was. So we knew it was in the original programme, and you know, we knew that the social interaction that people get from work is also very important. And this has really demonstrated it to its fullest. We've been putting all sorts of arrangements in place for staff. There's lots of sources of help for people who are you know, potentially suffering from mental health challenges, need support. One of the biggest issues we've tried to avoid is isolation. So we're encouraging managers, did it again this morning with leadership group, make sure that there is at least contact with staff. We know we've actually got some staff at home who are self-isolating and not able to work. So it's easy, especially all the pressures, for people to just get lost in that, and we lose that connection. So we've reinforced the need for connectivity. The standards we have for line managers in terms of people having regular one-to-ones, regular team meetings, they've all been maintained. They've been managed differently, absolutely, but they've all been maintained. So that's sort of a minimum standard. Maximum standard, we've got some managers who contact their teams on a daily basis. There's a daily check-in. You know, so that is kind of that really good practice that we're trying to convey across the board to make sure people don't get lost. And that's where, for me, especially as we move into recovery and transition to our new state, for want of a better word, is where we build in that individual risk assessment process. Because some people might not be able to cope with working at home, and their situation is isolation, and they're the people we would focus on either providing a base in an office, or at least part of the week in the office, so they can maintain that kind of contact. It's a national issue. You know, it's recognised across the board that this is, in terms of home working, you have to support the mental health of people, absolutely, to sustain that.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rice.
Yes, Jackie. It sounds very good. Do you envisage a reduction of staff in some services and redeploying them, for instance, into economic redevelopment led by the Director of Place?
Well, I'll selfishly say absolutely not, but no, that's not the right answer. I think as we move through the changing possible role of the council, how we work differently with the voluntary sector, you know, how we potentially start to change and develop the offer of the council through the wider transformation programme. Yes, potentially we will reconfigure some of the roles and the current jobs that exist within the council. Those decisions haven't been made yet, and I think it's probably a little bit too early because we're still in pandemic phase. You know, we're still dealing with the crisis and trying to absorb the additional work that recovery is bringing. One area that we've started thinking about in terms of resources to actually enhance that community collaboration that we want to achieve is whether our community team needs additional resources, because it's very small, it's got a big agenda, but I think as director boards start to look at the overall, we do need to look at where we need to provide additional support, whether that's through short term and to enhance resources capacity in the short term, with a longer term view perhaps something else, or whether the new model of the council. But at the moment there's been no firm decisions about providing the Director of Place with massive additional resources.
Yeah. And one further question, Chair, to Jackie. One of the criticisms of perhaps the planning function of the council is the inability to sign off Section 106s once planning permission is given either by delegated or by committee. And can I seek an assurance that extra resources will be put into that so that we have a full-time solicitor signing off our 106s like we do in Basildon? I'm led to believe by several people that we only have one solicitor attending once a week, signing off 106s. In a development community, which we have in Thurrock, a very vibrant community, we need to be fully switched on and delivering a service that is second to none. And the example I would give you is that Basildon, as an example, a small district, has full-time solicitors 5 days a week signing off 106s, where I'm led to believe we only have one solicitor coming in 1 day a week, which we share with Brentwood, and I find that very unsatisfactory, but perhaps you could comment on that.
I can't comment on that. I'm sorry, Councillor Rice, but I'm extraordinarily pleased that Sean has put his hand up. So with the chair's permission, I'm sure
Yes.
Sean will.
Absolutely. Sean.
Shame, I was looking forward to your response. I'm not going to be able to answer that directly, Councillor Rice, but I'll take that away as one of the issues. We're identifying a number of issues within legal services. We were obviously used to be in a shared service.
Yes.
And we've been moving out of that and moving into having more and more of our own staff and less shared. There are still some remnants over that. Just before lockdown started, Ian Hunt, the new assistant director for legal and the new monitoring officer, started. And one of the first things we gave him before he then went into lockdown was you do need to completely review your overall service now, see how we can make it more resilient and how we can make sure that it's focused on the right areas and we've got the right numbers in place. So it's an ongoing piece of work, and I can certainly feed your concerns about that level of support into that discussion.
Yeah, well, that's very reassuring, Sean. The reason I bring it up is that, you know, we're going to be fundamentally reliant on economic regeneration through our planning process, and we want to make sure that we give every assistance to both applicants and to our industry throughout Thurrock, so that we can actually create new employment. And it will be vital because in this COVID-19 episode, we will get redundancies. There is no doubt about it. All the national heavyweight papers are predicting it. And so we must regenerate our employment levels elsewhere. And that's why I'm asking that particular question, Sean.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I don't have any kind of further comments to add, so I'll just move to the recommendations. At 1.1 that we are happy that we've commented on the report and the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on ways of working and more broadly the agile agenda of the council. Are members happy to agree that we've done that?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much. That is agreed. And Jackie, just say thank you for all of your work through this report and your presentation tonight. I think it's a really kind of bold strategy. I think we all look forward to seeing it kind of bearing fruit over coming years and a new way of working for the council.
Chair, could I ask Jackie one final question?
Go on, Councillor Rice. We'll let one in since we haven't had one so far.
Just with your indulgence, Jackie. Obviously, members are very keen to have a full council meeting. Would that be High House in Purfleet?
Well, I might let Sean answer this one. I know there's been various discussions about a full council meeting. I was hoping it was going to be fully virtual and digital, so I could completely progress the agile working agenda. But I understand there's different points of view on that, but I should probably hand over to Sean before I dig myself into a very large hole.
We've looked at a number of different options. We've looked at how many people we can get in the council chamber. We have looked at High House or even the Civic Hall. The difficulties with either is the lack of equipment, the cost of actually running a meeting there, but that would have to be one of the considerations. We can do hybrid meeting of the council within the chamber as well, which is again one of the options. So again, nothing's particularly off the table at the moment, but if we're looking at the best approach that we've seen so far, it would more than likely be a hybrid within the council chamber.
Could I make one suggestion, Sean? William Edwards has a terrific facility in a hall which is very good on IT procedures and sound equipment. Could you perhaps look at that? Because I think with the size of that hall, we could have enough social distancing to put in 49 members and the associated officers, and it could be done in a safe model. Perhaps one could look at that.
I mean, we certainly know of William Edwards. We used to hold the elections counts there for a couple of years in terms of its size. I'm not actually sure it would be much bigger actually, because it's long. Although it's longer, it's thinner as well. But we'll say look at all options that we can. But as I say, at the moment, we've seen both virtual meetings now and hybrid meetings work very well, and that would be certainly a preference. But equally, it's a member's choice at the end of the day, and we'll feed that in as well.
Right, thank you very much.
Thank you. I think that was a worthwhile question to raise. So we'll move on now to the final item of evening, the work programme. Hopefully members had a chance to review the work programme. I believe there are a couple of items that we've discussed adding to this already. So first of all, I think it would be useful to see a standing item, certainly at the next meeting and potentially at future meetings as well, by way of an update in terms of the medium-term financial strategy and where we're standing in terms of the updates to our assumptions. I also note that we've got the Community Forum Chair's invite on the 10th of November. I think we were looking at having a community engagement strategy piece around that last year, which got moved over into the following year. So perhaps I can just kind of clarify that through Democratic Services, and if that's the case, we'll add that onto the agenda as well. And I think we discussed during the course of the meeting that having sort of further updates on connectivity and kind of broadband connections, fibre connections for Thurrock residents would also be something that we are interested in taking an item on through the course of the year. So those were the notes that I had for addition to the work programme. We'll just go around the committee just to sort of take any points anyone else would like to have considered. So, Councillor Duffin.
So, okay, just the sort of internet broadband, what the council is responsible for, what it's not, that would be just great.
Thanks very much. Councillor Churchman.
Nothing I can think of offhand, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Haig. Anything there, Councillor Ralph?
Nothing here.
And Councillor Rice.
Yes, Chair. Perhaps we can have a, I think probably a quarterly report on the investment strategy and how safe the investments are, so that we can all be assured, and most importantly, Chair, the public can be assured that the investment strategy is safe, because at 1.2 billion rising to 2 billion investments, we will be the largest indebted council in the country, and we want to make absolutely sure that those investments are safe and sound, and that the council taxpayers not put at risk. And the other item, Chair, is perhaps a half-yearly report on the IT support to members, whether it's through mini iPads, iPad Pros, new telephones, a general review of what we actually support the members with, all 49 of them, so that they're able to participate in this agile working, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll take those items away and sort of add appropriate points to the work programme going forward.
Just on the point regarding just the safety, can we widen it out? Because it's not just the safety, it's also worth looking at the awesome impact that they have and what a great position it puts us in having these investments. Because you need both sides. If we're going to look at any risk factor, it's worth looking at the reward, which is obviously there.
It seems like we should take a broader item on just the investment strategy. I think we should add governance to that as well. So I think that's one of the items this committee has discussed previously and where we made some specific recommendations. Thank you, councillors, for those.
I'm quite happy with that, Chair. I think that's very sensible.
Sorry, Sean. Sorry. Sean, do you want to raise a point?
Yeah, although some of it was just surpassed. What I was going to say was I was looking towards Councillor Duffin a little, actually. On the September meeting, we got the commercialisation strategy down. Now, that was originally around investments and wider commercial opportunities with the council. In terms of the wider opportunities, some of that is going to get impacted now by COVID. It's part of what we were talking about in the budget report. Are our income streams going to be as sound going forward as they currently are? So what I had been intended to do was say we could probably change the commercialisation strategy to the financial update, which would include investments. Having said that, I think you've made the point now that you would rather have a report directly on investments anyway. So that will be going to standards and audit and now coming to also overview and scrutiny. So I think it's going to be very well scrutinised overall. But if we can replace that with the commercialisation strategy at this time, then because I think they're duplicate.
Yeah, I think that's good. The one thing, Sean, I wouldn't want to miss as part of that kind of broader commercialisation piece is I know we've had a lot of conversations about diversification of income streams for the council, and I think it's helpful just to make sure that we don't lose that element of it when we have that discussion.
Yeah, I think rather than bring it under a commercialisation strategy, which is why it's easier to keep investments separately, maybe, we'll bring in terms of the financial updates of MTFS, we're obviously going to have to look at how we close a budget gap. Now, that will undoubtedly have to look and reflect investments, but equally it will look at other income streams as well as where we can make cost reduction.
That sounds good.
Potentially worth maybe pushing commercialisation to the November one. I don't know, because I'm guessing it's going to be tough to look at many commercialisation projects coming straight out of COVID. So maybe move the two to different meetings. But just an idea for throw out there.
Chair, that's what I think. I think if we in a way, if we take out commercialisation strategy with Councillor Duffin's and your approval and the committee's approval, I think they get overtaken then by two separate reports. One would be the one that you've now requested on investments, and the second one would be on the MTFS update. Because part of the MTFS update, we'll be looking at that diversification of income streams as being one of the ways of achieving a balanced budget.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, I think that sounds good to me. Any final comments from members or anyone else before we call a halt to that item? No, okay, thank you very much. We've agreed those additional items for the work programme. And so I guess it's just falls to me then to say thank you everyone for attending digitally this evening. I think we've managed to achieve pretty much no technical hitches, which is quite a big achievement for the evening. Yeah, thank you to the committee. Stay safe, and we'll meet again in September.
Very good.
Thank you.
Yeah, well done.
Take care.
Thanks, Lucy.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, Lucy.